what's the problem with xenophobic nationalism? Don't you think that's better for Americans in general?
To be xenophobic nationalism is better?
We should have a coherent culture. Everyone should be a part of the same culture.
Which, do you get to choose what the culture is?
We already have a dominant culture.
I mean, look, I gotta be honest with you, you and I have a fundamental disagreement. We will never see eye to eye on this. Hi, I'm Sam Seder, host of The Majority Report, and today I am surrounded by 20 conservatives. My first claim is Trump's attack on DEI hides his real goal, which is to give corporations more power.
Sorry, Sam.
No worries.
All right. I think I have a slight issue with the back end of the premise. I guess Trump's attacks on DEI being a real goal to, give corporations more power. I'd rather center the conversation around the democratic, especially as conservatives, the issues that people have with DEI and why I believe Trump would, want to support the issues that, people are voting for him for.
I mean, I'm talking about his whole attack on DEI. It's actually DEIA,
Sure.
right? You know that.
Right.
In government agencies. The A being for accessibility.
Right. Yeah, and I think the attack on DEI isn't an attack on people's protections. It's on the other end of the spectrum, right? Wanting to end DEI doesn't want to end protections for someone being disabled, someone being inaccessible to get into a job. It rather wants to de-incentivize corporations to push them to hire these people on unfair bases, right?
Okay, but DEIA is not about quotas or anything like that. It is about protections for people within these organizations, or to make sure that you have different communities that have the opportunity to apply to these things.
Right.
So it can mean, within government agencies, it means things like, let's pay interns so that not only wealthy people can have their kids do internships in these agencies.
Right.
Or let's put out notices around different parts of town,
Sure.
metaphorically speaking, so that people know this job exists.
Right. This is where it begins, but this isn't the ultimate goal that conservatives have an issue with. Conservatives don't have an issue with trying to spread job applications to poorer communities. So
Well, then
everyone
why
gets
rescind DEIA requirements in government agencies?
Because the problem with DEIA is there may not be perceived actual number quotas, but that's what it devolves into, and especially with corporations,
Do you have the evidence of that?
I mean, sure, we can look at corporations that are government agencies that are hiring people on not true proper bases. We can even look
Well,
at.
I mean,
we can even look at.
Would you
the
have
DNC's,
any evidence that that's happening?
Yeah, even the DNC's nomination of Kamala as president this year. There was no reason to nominate Kamala as she wasn't democratically selected. She wasn't. She didn't go through a single primary.
Well,
none of these things.
So you're saying that Kamala was the vice president of the United States after
Yes.
the president drops out 2 months before the convention. You think that's a DEI
She wasn't
hire?
Every presidential nominee is democratically selected to be the nominee for that
Do
party,
you realize
except
there were
for
not
Kamala
even
Harris.
primaries prior to 1972
Well,
in
sure,
the Democratic
but
Party?
this isn't before 1972.
Well, I understand, but what did you think you were going to run primaries in those 2 months?
Well,
I mean,
sure,
Joe Biden should have dropped out 3 years ago, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, sure, but even before, when Kamala was running in primaries, she wasn't the next man up. None of this. She wasn't the next person.
Well, she was the vice president,
right? Of course, but she wasn't in
tiny
primaries.
detail. But
right,
listen,
well,
aside from, I would have might have wanted a different candidate as well. But that has nothing to do with Trump rescinding orders that basically say you need to search for a wide range of candidates, not necessarily give any different benefits, but you need to make sure different communities have access to the awareness of this job. You need in your office accessibility for people who have physical handicaps.
Sure.
if you have folks who identify as, as trans, you need to make it at least hospitable and not, this is all non-discriminatory stuff. That's what this is all about.
But you're cherry picking the portions of DEI that even conservatives don't have issues. Conservatives don't have issues with making workplaces.
The whole DEI apparatus within our government was a function of doing exactly what I said, had nothing to do with quotas.
It is unfortunate that those things get taken out, and there might not have been specific
numerical
quotas.
What else was he trying to take out?
It's trying to take out people getting jobs that don't deserve those jobs. People getting pushed into positions they have no qualification.
There is no evidence of what you just said happening in these government agencies.
That's not true at all. I mean, we're not allowed to sit here and have notes and numbers to pull up for you. You can't
give me one example.
You can't ask me to pull up numbers when I'm not able to sit here and look on a computer for you. But these are the problems that conservatives.
Sorry, you've been voted out. Please return to your seat.
Sam.
Thanks, man. See ya.
Okay, so I think the roots issue with DEI isn't what the previous gentleman was trying to point. Conservatives aren't necessarily have issues with those things like accessibility to people who might need help. The issue is, and I kind of referred to this before, when you have agencies and systems, what tends to happen when you have government overreach, big government, is that agencies and systems get abused. And I think unequivocally, DEI was heavily abused in practice. It was great in theory. It's idealistic, which is sure is fine, that a lot of people can get behind, but it was abused in a lot of ways. When you have actors, like we're in California right now, when you have actors, white male actors who are being told, we do not want white men, we're not gonna cast any white men, we only want this particular kind of gender, race, right? That is an abuse of a system. It's no longer fair, but more about just perpetuating one aspect of, visual compelling aspects. Because at the end of the day, what's gonna happen is companies are gonna say, well, we want to look the most diverse.
Okay, well,
and what that is it's moral grandstanding. It's saying because we have more black women, we sell better soda, like that.
I got you.
That is not.
Well, that's getting a little far afield from what Trump's DEI orders are. But I can tell you, as somebody who was a sitcom actor in the 90s, I would walk into a room and everybody I would see would look like me. And I was doing a second position, which doesn't even exist anymore, where you do 2 pilots a year. And I was looking around basically every part of television when I was a kid. I was centered in some fashion. It was either this is about my mother, or this is about my father, or someone like me was centered. So, we can argue as to whether or not Hollywood is overcorrected in some fashion. But on a governmental level, the DEIA directives that agencies were following for the past 4 years, there's nothing, I don't know what you mean by abuse on it, but there is no evidence that it was an affirmative action program in those instances. It was about anti-discrimination. You cannot discriminate against these people, and you want to open up opportunities for a broad swath of people. Again, the internship is like one of the most material things that exist there, where the idea that you need to pay interns. And that's important because you want low-income people to have the same sort of like opportunities to see these things as wealthy people. My kids can maybe afford to do an internship for the summer instead of going and getting a job.
I think what's happening is we're talking about 2 different things.
But I'm talking about Trump's DEIA rescission is a way of basically driving people out of these agencies, making
You're saying Trump specifically, and I understand why you're saying Trump, but I think the American people as a whole have kind of, and I won't say whole because obviously it's not 100%, but a majority of the American people have kind of rejected DEI because, again,
I don't think a majority of Americans know what DEIA is.
That may be the case, but again, my point is we're talking about abuse of a system. What you're talking about is not necessarily what was happening. What people were seeing were, hey, because you're white, you can't do this. And liberals like to do this thing where they create systems and then they created the whole idea of woke and then they backed away, and then conservatives say woke and then they're like, well, we don't know what woke is. They created DEI. Biden literally said, Kamala Harris is being chosen because she is a black woman, and then all of a sudden, Democrats for the rest after that said that's not why she was chosen, even though Biden literally said that. And then we have this we have this cognitive dissonance as if we're not living in reality.
Biden wanted to make sure that there was that there was an opportunity for a black woman to be his vice president. Without a doubt.
So why did Democrats move away from that and say no, it wasn't because she was a black woman?
I don't know
my point is that
it's not because she's a black woman.
But that's what they said. I can agree that it's not because she's a black woman, but that's what they said. Why did they say that then?
No, because there are plenty of black women, right? Like, he could have picked anybody, but he picked specifically her. You're positing the idea that there wasn't a black woman who would have been qualified for that position.
No,
and I don't believe that.
No, that's not what conservatives aren't saying, that there aren't, because again, even in the Republican Party right now and in Trump's cabinet, there are people of color that Democrats pretend don't exist, like J.D. Vance's wife, and
J.D. Vance's wife is not in the cabinet.
No, but if J.D. Vance was a Democrat, his wife would be lauded all over everything because of her color of her skin.
Listen, I'm not here to defend the Democrats' choice on every policy, but there is one party in this country that is identitarian. There is one party that is represented and it is homogenous, and it is the Republican Party. 85% of Republicans are white. That's just the reality of it.
So does that
Some
mean
people
that?
don't necessarily have a problem with that.
But here's the thing. You said even if let's just say, okay, that's true. 80% of Republicans are white. Does that mean that they're less moral? That they can't run an effective government? What does race have to do? What does race have to do? Hold on. What does
Donald Trump didn't have to say my vice president's going to be a white male?
No.
Because they all knew it was going to be.
No, this is the premise of DEI. What does race have to do with running an effective government? What does race have to do? If let's say DEI on the micro level,
I will tell you right now.
DEI on the micro level at McDonald's.
I'll tell you.
Am I going to get better nuggets?
I'll ask you a question.
If the cashier is black or white, what does that have to do with anything?
I'll tell you what it. First of all, DEIA means that if you come into this agency or corporation, you're not going to be discriminated against because you don't look like everybody else, or you don't have the same physical abilities as everybody else, or you may require handles on the bathroom or whatever it is. That's what DEIA does. But does it make a government better if there's a broad representation of the people it's supposed to govern? Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Regardless of DEI, don't we already have things in our Constitution that protects people's rights, protects people?
No.
We don't?
No.
Do we or do we not?
No, we do not. Tell me what protects people from discrimination in housing and in work and hiring or getting loans. It's all statutes. And in these government agencies, there was nothing except for that order. That's why Trump just rescinded it.
I'm gonna tap out because I think someone else has a better, can defend that point specifically better than me.
All right, please return to your seat.
Hi. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Okay. When it comes to DEI, essentially, if a person was not racist, he would hire someone regardless, right? So why would we need a policy to protect a person if we've moved past racism? So would you consider yourself racist?
Wait, are you suggesting we've moved past racism?
Would you consider yourself racist?
I consider myself, and sometimes I think we all practice some form of, white supremacy. I think actually we all do to some degree.
Well, I'm glad that you're saying that. So I guess going to the LGBT topic, it seems like it's very prevalent for you as an issue.
It seems like a big issue. I mean, the Republican Party spent literally hundreds of millions of dollars demonizing trans people.
Well, the reason why they've done something like that, and I think you're misconstruing the narrative, they haven't demonized them. They simply want protections back for their own children, because children are being stripped away from their parents.
Who's their own children? Wait, children are being stripped away from their parents?
Yes, due to AB 954, they've now included gender identity as a premise to remove and strip parental rights for children who who maybe they are rejecting their gender ideology.
So, but you'd be okay with parents who agree with their children's doctors to provide gender-affirming care?
I do not agree with that. Do you?
I believe that parents and doctors can make those decisions with the kids,
If
of
a
course.
child can't smoke, drink, or have sex before the age of 18, they should not be able to consent to a sex change. Now, in
Well,
terms of a
I don't know that
DEI
they can,
DEI initiative, the reason why there's military bans on trans women and trans men is because they do not have the ability to cooperate at a mental capacity when they're constantly undergoing hormone treatment, as well as depression pills, as well as different mood stabilizer pills. And so when you go out to combat, do you really think you're going to bring an ice cooler pack with your whether that be hormone estrogen or whatever it may be, while you're about to shoot someone of the opposing war?
Well, the executive orders that Trump gave were DEIA orders that had to do with agencies that have nothing to do with the military.
Yes, they do. Yes, they absolutely do.
The FDA, they just revoked the ability of the Air Force to teach Air Force members about the Tuskegee Airmen.
Well,
Like,
we're not-
what are we talking about here?
Okay, well,
Honestly, like they're rewriting history.
well, that's your perspective, right? But at the end of the day, if a person
Tuskegee Airmen, we can all agree, existed, right?
Just listen to this. If you were racist, right, and you were an employer, and if you wanted to absolutely be racist and exercise that, you would. I think DEI sort of prevents people from seeing the reality. If a person truly wanted to hire you based on your intellect, based on your skill set, they would. DEI essentially provides tax cuts. For the end of the year, when you create your tax returns, they give you a tax credit for hiring someone who is black or a person of color. I don't know if you knew that.
In these agencies?
In agencies and private
In government
businesses.
agencies, they don't get tax cuts for hiring people of color.
And the other thing I wanted
This is
to,
to
and I,
protect
the other
people
thing I
from
want
discrimination.
the other thing I want to kind of state here is that I've realized that a lot of the times with the liberals is that you guys push for example, for DEI and people of Latino or Hispanic descent. And a lot of the times what you don't realize is you're actually doing more harm than good by putting them in positions where you make them believe that it's based on the color of their skin. It's based on
DEIA does not is not.
It's based on merit. DEI emphasizes color, skin color,
No,
physical
it
attributes.
says that the people who work in your agency, it's about anti-discrimination
Discrimination against what?
against people who may have different cultural mores, may have different.
But that's irrelevant to a job, right? It should be based on merit. And that is the emphasis
People
here.
get hired as a merit, but if the
Not
DEI,
if you get a
if
tax
the DEIA, I'm talking about Trump's rescission of
If
these
you
orders
received a
on
tax
these
cut as
agencies.
an employer, wouldn't you hire a person of color?
Dude,
If you could pay them less?
listen, we're talking about government agencies that do not get tax cuts. They don't. Government agencies.
They don't.
No,
Yes,
these are.
they do. They absolutely do.
I'm talking about
Every
parts of-
private and public sector gets tax cuts when you hire a person of color.
Government agencies don't pay taxes. Government agencies are funded by the government.
That is not true. That is not true. And you know what? I think the whole juxtapose of this entire conversation.
What month is this?
This is January.
Okay, so we can agree on that. The FDA does not pay taxes. It does not get a tax cut because it doesn't pay taxes. DEIA forces them as an agency to say if you have a job opening, you must do your best efforts to make sure that every
I like that. I
part
love
of
me a
society.
buzzword. You must do your best effort. I love that buzzword.
Okay,
Because you
pause.
feel like you have to. You're pressured
Pause.
to.
Yes.
You shouldn't be pressured to hire someone based on skin color.
No, not to hire someone on skin color, but put up notice about that the job exists. Make sure that you put it in different communities so that you have as wide an application pool as possible.
And therefore you get
All
tax
right.
cuts.
All right, return to
At
your
the
seat.
end of the year when you file taxes, you get a tax cut for hiring someone who speaks
Please
a different
return to your
language or
seat.
different skin color.
I don't know how to respond to that. How you doing?
So I want a little bit more clarification, because I don't even know if we got it yet, on which part benefits corporations, like from your perspective.
So agencies, the U.S. government agencies, the vast majority of them, what they function to do is inhibit corporations from essentially externalizing their costs onto society.
Sure.
So the example would be, I used it before, but it's a good one. I'm making Teflon, C8, for instance, okay? And C8 is supposed to be burned because instead of deposited, because it's a forever chemical. And I can go out and instead of burning it, it's too expensive to burn it, I'm going to dump it into a river. And the EPA comes in and says, you can't do that. We're going to fine you. You're not allowed to do this. But what the company is doing when they do that is they're going to take the profits that come with lowering their costs by dumping it into the river. And those costs are then borne by everybody who lives around that river. They're going to get cancer. They're going to get gastrointestinal problems, whatever it is. And society bears the cost of that.
Can you connect the dots for me, though? Because it sounds like we're talking about something completely different.
And so the DEIA stuff is just the beginning of demoralizing these agencies and trying to wreck them from the inside. It's all part of Russell Vought's thing, the OMB, the whole Schedule F, where they get rid of civil servants and they demoralize people and they don't want them to be able to function.
So then would you agree, if this is about demoralizing, I mean, over 75 million people voted for Trump, right? He won the popular vote. Do you not think that in part, you even said yourself that Americans don't really know what DEIA is, according to your definition of it?
Well, the government's definition of it.
Okay, well, I would argue that the average American is demoralized by what they've seen, the way that the government goes about their DEI policies and the military and other organizations, not just the military.
Please return to your seat.
Okay.
Hey, before we go any further, we want to take a moment to say thanks so much to Straight Arrow News for powering the fact checks in this video. Straight Arrow News is an app and website that is on a mission to raise the bar on journalism in a time of media bias and mistrust. Their team of journalists believe that unbiased news should be the standard and not just the exception, so they report down the middle with facts, delivering news without bias, filter, or spin. Plus, their Media Mist tool allows you to discover news that's being underreported or not even reported at all by different sides of mainstream media. That's why we're so happy to be partnering with Straight Arrow News. The work they're doing gives us a complete picture of the news straight from our phones and tablets with their app. Go to san.com/surrounded or click the link in the description to check it out. By clicking that link, you're not just supporting this channel, you're also supporting a group of journalists that are raising the bar on news and focusing on serving you unbiased, straight facts. Thanks again to Straight Arrow News for partnering with us on this episode. Now let's get into it.
My next claim is, unless you're a billionaire, a religious fundamentalist, or a xenophobic nationalist, voting for Trump was a mistake.
Okay, so let's tackle one aspect, religious fundamentalists. What benefit would religious fundamentalists get? And also, can you define what is a religious fundamentalist?
Maybe you could say more of a Christian nationalist.
Okay.
In this instance. But things like, the attacks on trans folks, the attacks on a woman's right to choose, the idea that we're going to get stuff like an enhanced RFRA, which is going to mean that if you're a pharmacist and you don't want to provide birth control, you may not have to.
Don't you think you're assuming that
if you believe that public education, we should take that money and pour it into religious schools, you're gonna get a benefit out of a Trump administration.
Yeah, but don't you think you're assuming that the vast majority of Americans who are moderates?
What do you think you're gonna get out of the Trump administration?
Economic relief. That was
what kind of economic relief? They're going to cut Social Security. You're going to have to pay for your parents. They're going to cut when they go after the agencies like they're going after, right? This is outlined in Project 2025. Russ Vought, who's going to be the OMB head, he was the OMB head the first time around. He wrote all the book on this stuff.
Okay, well, you bring up Project 2025.
When you cut when you cut agencies and go after them, and you fire all the inspector generals so that they're not being able to make sure that the agencies are working, who do you think profits from that? It's corporations. They're going to go after agencies that make sure your food is not full of botulism, that your air is not full of mercury, that your water is not full of C8. This is what they're going to do. Agencies exist to curb corporations from externalizing their costs and privatizing their profits. So it may be cheaper for a company to dump their chemicals into a river than it is for them to dispose of it in a safe way. And so they get the profits from that, but the costs are borne by society. They're borne by society in the form of, like, people get cancer. They're borne by society in terms of, like, we've got to do the cleanup. That's what agencies do.
Pause. You've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
That's good. Hey, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Okay, so I would like to touch on the religious fundamentalist aspect.
Yeah.
Are you an atheist?
I'm a Reformed Jew. I don't have a strong belief in the existence of God, but I don't think that religion in and of itself is bad.
Okay, so what's wrong with religious fundamentalists? So, like, when you said trans rights and women's rights or something like that?
Well, the problem I have with religious fundamentalists, and really more, I guess it's really theocrats, is that they want to impose their morality that comes from their religion on the rest of us, and I don't.
But morality, from your view, is going to be a preference, right? It's not morality; it's a preference. So morality without a foundation is going to reduce you to a preference.
Well, I have a foundation for my morality.
Which is what?
It's a humanist vision of what basically creates as little suffering as possible for as many people.
Okay, so you're like a consequentialist? Utilitarian?
I don't really bother myself with being a consequentialist or a utilitarian.
It's always going to reduce you to a preference. So if you say that killing is wrong and I say it's right, you would really have no contention with that.
Well, no, I don't base my understanding of civil society on religion. And so we have a civil society. Okay. We have laws that we have decided as a society in a democratic way. And for some people, it's okay for it to be informed by their religion. That's okay.
Okay, perfect. So if tomorrow society comes together and we say, hey, trans folks don't deserve rights, you would be okay with that?
No, I would be against it, but I mean, it would be
morally right under your view.
Not morally right. No. I'm not talking about morals.
Okay,
here.
so here's where I'm getting to, right? Religious foundations provide an ethical framework for one to live their life off of.
I believe you can have an ethical framework without religion.
And if we take the leftist view to its logical tail end, to its extreme view, you have low reproductive birth rates. You have a reproductive dead end, so two men together can't reproduce unless they have to take from a healthy straight couple. Religion provides this foundation where you do prioritize the nuclear family.
So do you have a problem with gay people being married?
It's not that I have a problem. I just don't see a justification for why they ought to be gay outside of it just feels good. Can you give me another justification for it?
Well, I think maybe that's the way they were born.
Okay, what about pedophiles? Are they born that way?
They may be, yeah.
Okay, so should we let a pedophile off the hook since they were born that way?
No, I think we as a society has decided...
Should implement duties to prevent them from acting on that innate urge, correct?
Well, I think between consenting adults, it's a different thing than...
Okay, so you're okay with a 45-year-old dad with a 19-year-old daughter as well? Incest?
No.
If they consent, you're okay with that?
No, I think society has also determined that it's not beneficial.
Right, there's duties and obligations that we have. So religion provides those duties. Life isn't about freedom and exercising what you want.
I mean, well, you want to impose your religious doctrine on me, and I don't want that.
You just admitted we need duties. We have responsibility as a society to keep us functioning, to keep us thriving. Your leftist view, the liberal view, doesn't provide anything besides it just makes me feel good. Religion does. So what's your argument?
What's my argument as to why I don't want
you have no
your
contention.
religion to... Well, because first of all, I don't think that you have the right to corner what God is telling us is right or wrong. And there are differences between religions. And so my argument is, like, you're not going to keep halal or kosher, right? I mean, I don't believe that someone has a corner on religious truth. And the reason why we have a democracy is because we didn't want a king. And the kings came from the idea that their God said that they're the ones who's supposed to be king. And so we can disagree on this. I don't want to live in a country that is ruled by religious fundamentalism.
And if I do, you have no issue with that.
And no. And this is why I say, under Trump, yes, you have won.
Yes.
You have a
Only
bunch
male
of Christian.
and female. You're right.
You have a
We
Christian
won.
nationalist,
Yes,
and
which is necessary.
And so I concede the point that under Trump, your Christian nationalism has gained an advantage
Yes.
under this.
Sorry, we're going
And
to have
so
more
I'm-
kids. We're going to have less abortions. We're going to have more family. We're going to have stable family households. Sorry about better
Trans
education.
people, gay people should be outlawed.
They should be straight. They should be straight.
Women should be secondary to their husbands.
Women should submit
right?
to the husbands.
Women
That doesn't
should
mean they
submit to the
that doesn't mean they are
husbands.
slaves.
Right,
It doesn't mean they
no,
are slaves. It means they are
I
protected.
understand. You
Okay,
got
let
a
me ask you then. Let me ask you.
No.
Should
I
women
want
be
you-
drafted?
listen,
Should women be
listen,
drafted?
Listen, I think
If they're equal, should they be drafted?
I think this is the vision that you have, and I think Trump supports it.
Yes.
I think the Christian nationalists he has throughout his government are all going to work towards your vision.
Yes.
And my hope is that when people look at this, they say, hey, wait a second. I don't want my life to be dictated by the notion of a Christian nationalist prescription. Now, you may win out. I mean, certainly, like if you look at a country like Iran, they have a theocracy there, and that. And apparently that's, good for them if they want it.
My final point is whenever
but
we
I don't want to live in a
My final point is
theocracy.
whenever we see people live out Christian values to its full extent, we see a great society. When we see people deviate from that, that's where all the problems arise.
All right.
I
pause.
think you are at home in the Trump. Trump
Thank you
world.
very much.
You've been voted out. Please return to your seat.
Sorry, guys. I think I have an issue with the implications of the prompt. I mean, of course, I'll stick on the religious fundamentalism. I think it's unfair to view Christianity separated from the ideology that Christianity informs, right? You have an ideology that you vote upon because you view it to be the truth that benefits everyone in a society. That's how a democracy works. I, as a Christian, have an ideology that informs my opinions, and I believe that it is the most moral and correct way for a society to function. So I think if we put religious fundamentalism in a box where you say any moral implications that I draw from this, religion is unable to be voted upon, unable to be pushed onto you because simply it's a religion, is unfair to view it that way. Religion is an ideology like all ideologies are. It's you vote away.
I don't mind you. I don't dispute the idea that you could have a religious ideology and want to see it imposed upon others, and it's not inconsistent with my claim. My claim is that Donald Trump is ushering in an element of Christian theocracy that I can't remember his name, Alesia, and you may be excited about, but I'm not excited about it. I don't think the vast majority of Americans are, but maybe I'm wrong.
Right.
I mean, I don't think this country was set up to be a theocracy,
Sure.
and I find it problematic that it will be, but
Right.
others will be happy about it.
I think it's unfair as well to label any morals that comes from religion inherently immediately theocratic. Like having a theocracy is something different than having.
I think love thy neighbor is a
Sure.
good precept,
Right.
and I don't know that we should necessarily legislate it, but I think it's a good precept.
Cool.
I think there are things from religion that are good.
Yeah.
I interviewed Desmond Tutu years ago, who said that religion can be. Is like a knife. It can be used to spread butter, or it could be used to stab people.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean that I want religious doctrine to be the same as the law of the land. We have a democracy,
Sure.
and it was founded on trying to get out
Right.
from some type of like religious oppression,
Yeah.
which means one religion shouldn't dominate in this country. That's my sense.
Yeah, and I see that, but I think I have an issue with where you would perceive religious doctrine is derived from, right? A guy doesn't, at least in Christianity, a guy doesn't go in a room and come out and say that he has a secret message from God that everyone now has to follow. Religious doctrine is ruled over, it's reasoned over, the same way any ideology is discovered.
I'm not talking about the validity of religious doctrine.
Right.
I'm talking about religious doctrine supplanting democracy and civil society.
And I'm saying that religious doctrine is democratic inherently, and in the way that you.
Well, I
earlier-
mean, look, we can have a debate as to whether or not women should be subservient to
Exactly.
men.
Right.
I don't think they should be,
Right.
and in a democracy, I don't think it's healthy.
Right, but when you said earlier with him that someone shouldn't have I don't know the exact word, like a chokehold on what is, religious truth and what isn't religious truth, that's not how religious truth itself works, and that's not how religious truth is brought to the political table to have that work either, right?
I don't know. When Pete Hegseth is in a bar yelling, we're going to kill all Muslims.
Well, that's, yeah.
Yeah, but now he's in charge of the largest military in the history of the
Sure.
world. I think, and he is informed by his Christian nationalism. I think that's a problem.
Right. Well, but
we
we
can
don't-
disagree on
Yeah,
that.
we don't take.
Pause. You've been voted out by the majority.
Thanks,
Please
Sam.
return to your seat.
Okay, so Eleazar mentioned his views on gay marriage, and I saw that you believe that essentially conservatives don't believe that gay marriage should be allowed. I want to ask everybody in this room, is there any law or legislation that Donald Trump has passed to prohibit same-sex marriage in the last 4 years? Okay. Is there anyone in here who would potentially oppose two people kissing in public that are of the same sex? You could raise your hand if you want. Yes, in public, kissing in public. No law against it, just your own opinion. Okay, so these are all people's opinions, right? The same way you have your opinions about Christians is the same way these people are
No,
allowed.
I don't have a problem with Christians.
Well, you do not believe that theology should be at its
We should not have a theocracy.
Correct. And so what I'm saying is, I think that Christianity, I'm a Catholic, I think that Christianity is, fundamentally very important to instill family values in myself as well as every person who wants to have children. Now let's talk about...
I'm okay with that too.
Let's talk about Order 14,166. That is an executive order that Donald Trump just imposed on identifying what is male and female. So I personally believe, as well as many transsexuals, friends of mine, believe that a woman is a biological female, as well as a man being a biological male. You are assigned what you are at birth. You are not assigned your gender later on. What you choose to express is something that is similar to wearing a garment, similar to what you decide to put on your face, and I don't think there should be laws or legislations dictating people or imposing laws to manipulate children, for example, to castrate their bodies at such a young age. 50% of
Do
children...
you know how many children are treated over the past 5 years? Let's say, I think it was from 2018 to 22, there was a study that just came out from Harvard. Do you know how many children received gender-affirming care, but broken down into puberty blockers and then hormones?
Give me the numbers.
You
since
tell
said-
me, I'm curious.
Well,
because
I'm curious because you're bringing it up.
No, I have the numbers.
Okay, tell me.
I do, but
Tell
I'm
me.
curious if you know.
Tell me what the
I
numbers are.
promise to tell you after you tell me what you think it is.
I'm not gonna play
I
that
love
game.
it because I have a feeling
not
you
playing this
think it's-
game.
No, I am playing this game because
Why?
I think you think it's much higher. When you tell me that kids are being castrated, I know you don't really know what these numbers
Well,
are, and
almost-
I do know these numbers.
Okay, well, I can tell you this much.
What?
It was reported that scientifically every single child who has received gender-affirming care, about roughly 50% of them regret it. And 50% of them are suicidal because of it. They're actually more depressed because of it.
How many of those kids? How many?
psychologist,
How
by the
many
way-
over the course of 5 years?
Well, tell me.
You tell me.
Tell me.
Just give
I
me
know
a
what you're trying to do.
ballpark.
You're trying to put me in this chokehold of like,
No, I'm
I
not trying
gotcha
to put you in a
moment.
No, this is definitely a gotcha
No.
moment because I'm suggesting to you that you think this problem is much bigger than
It is a huge problem. Medi-Cal, you know, Medi-Cal covers inmate trans women.
I understand that, yes. And I know
medical coverage.
one person has had that surgery.
I don't
ever.
understand how my
But-
taxes
okay.
should go for an inmate
Okay,
prisoner
if
who
you
wants
have
to transition.
Well, I think because we got to do health care for
No,
prisoners,
Gavin
and you don't
Newsom-
consider
Gavin
it real
Newsom-
health care. But
Gavin
hold on, I
Newsom
don't want
has
to get
imposed
listen,
$2.6
it's
billion in
900 kids
2022.
over 5 years.
That is a lot of
received
children.
Puberty blockers.
That is a lot of children.
900
AB
kids over 5 years.
547
Do
just
you know how
passed,
many,
including
do you know
gender
how many kids
identity,
died during COVID?
gender identity,
All right.
to allow children
10
to be
kids a
separated from
month
their
die
parents just
from
due to not
accidental
affirming their gender
gun deaths.
identity.
But here's the point. Listen, Trump how is he hurting these people? He just rescinded the ability of the Labor Bureau to investigate discrimination in workplace. Are you for trans people being discriminated in workplace?
They're never being discriminated?
Are
Hold on.
you for trans
You're
people being discriminated with
I'm
housing?
very passionate about that question, and can I answer it? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I believe that affirmative action should be.
It's not affirmative action.
Oh, then what is it?
It's anti-discrimination. It's
Okay,
not saying that you have to
regardless,
hire
hold on.
trans people.
Okay,
It's
well,
saying
hold on.
you can't fire someone when you find out they're trans.
Okay, well, hold on a minute. So when you hire someone or when you interview someone, for example, you are supposed to interview them based on their knowledge and their work ethic, not based on sex.
I'm not saying affirmative
not based
action.
on their sexual
Are you
orientation.
allowed to fire them if you find out they're trans?
If you need
Do you-
to, if you need to, then you should. If you need to, then
All
you
right,
should.
well, so we have a disagreement.
All right,
I don't
pause.
believe people should be discriminated against.
Pause.
And that's not discrimination. It's based on your knowledge, not what you sleep with, not who you sleep with. Just saying.
Hi.
Sam.
So I actually think that this liberal world order needs to be thrown away completely, and I think Christian nationalism would be a good alternative. What we're seeing right now is
And
just
congratulations.
yeah, and thank you. And yeah, I think what we're seeing right now is a culture of death. This is the most suicidal generation ever. We have millions of children dying by abortion. People aren't even reproducing. We don't even have like a.
Should we mandate people reproduce?
No, I don't think we need to mandate. We can just stop them from killing their kids. There
So
are like.
you want to outlaw abortion?
Yes.
Yes, I mean, we have a fundamental disagreement on this, and my claim was that if you voted for Trump, it would be to your benefit if you want to outlaw
I think it would
abortion.
benefit. I think it would benefit everyone.
Yeah, I disagree. I think that that women should have the right to choose.
I think that it would benefit everyone to bring back the family unit, to stop having women just thrown into the workforce.
Maybe
It's-
we shouldn't allow women to choose to divorce unless their husbands say it's okay.
I mean, I don't really believe in divorce in general, so like, sure.
All right. I mean, this I think though reinforces my point that if you are
But it would be better for society.
Christian
It would be better for
theocrat, then
everybody
you
in
would be
society.
happy.
And same with xenophobic what's the problem with xenophobic nationalism? Don't you think that's better for Americans in general?
To be xenophobic
Yes.
nationalism is better.
We should have a coherent culture. Everyone should be a part of the same culture. We should have assimilation.
Which do you get to choose what the culture is?
We already have a dominant culture.
What is the
based
dominant
on
culture?
European and Christian values and identity. That is the dominant culture.
White
It's
Christian-
rooted in European identity.
White. So your argument is that
That has been the
it's-
dominant culture.
Just to be
and
clear,
we're not letting people assimilate to that. We're saying you
Your-
should keep your culture, and this is why our culture is so divided.
your argument is that Trump is good for those who want a dominant white European culture.
I mean, that is what America is. It's rooted in European identity and Christian values. That's what it has been. Would you really disagree with that? What is it then, if that's not the identity of America?
Well, I think the identity of
For the
America.
majority of time, America's been a country. You don't think that's been the identity?
Well, actually, no. I think actually the identity of America has been, for better or for worse, a melting pot in that regard.
Yeah, maybe since like the 1960s. Even then, even we had this idea of a melting pot literally means assimilation too. It means melting. It means you're assimilating to the dominant
But,
culture. Is that not
well,
what melting
no,
means?
No, it doesn't
and
mean
now
you're
instead we're
assimilating
saying there's something
to
wrong with
the dominant
xenophobia.
culture. No, I mean, look, I got to be honest with you. You and I have a fundamental disagreement. We will never see eye to eye on this. It's a choice. And people, I think what you're expressing, though, is really what the Trump movement at its heart is about. And I think that's problematic.
I disagree. I don't think Trump's like anywhere close to being a Christian nationalist. That's ridiculous. Like Trump's basically a Democrat from like 15 years ago when it comes to social
So you
issues.
don't think that he's conservative enough for you?
Oh, definitely. Nowhere close. No.
He's not xenophobic enough for you?
No, he's trying to import a bunch of H-1Bs. Are you kidding?
Right. Oh, so you want to get them out too? Yeah. No, I mean, I think you're making my argument for me.
All right.
Well,
okay.
I'm just saying he's not even in this. Okay.
My next claim is the GOP will destroy Social Security and health care. Nice to see you.
So, what if Social Security should go away? That's my question to you.
Because Social Security keeps 2/3 of our elderly out of poverty. And not only does it keep our elderly out of poverty, it's essentially a social insurance program that protects you if at the end of your life you don't have enough money to survive.
For
And
right
so-
now, do you know that it's also the albatross around our generation's neck?
No, it isn't.
Okay, so
Let me just explain this.
Well, you're
Let me
going to
explain
go
this to you.
back to lecturing me about Social
because-
Security.
Well,
we don't
that's
have.
what we're talking
we
about.
are,
Social
yeah,
Security.
Social Security is one of the top 3 funded.
Social Security is almost the biggest thing that our government does.
Exactly, and we are
it
more than
keeps
$30 trillion in debt.
2/3 of our, well, first of all, Social Security cannot contribute legally to the deficit.
Because they don't even account it in the federal deficit
That's
every year.
correct.
We have
because
30
it's
years. We're
self-funding. When Social Security started in 1936, you have more workers than retirees because people haven't entered into retirement. By 1970, it was at 3.5 to 1. Now it's at 2.5 to 1. But productivity has increased during that time, so the amount of money paid into Social Security has been up there. The reason why we are running out of money just for the trust fund, not for Social Security, like I say, if we do nothing with Social Security now, it is statutorily unable to contribute to the debt. The math is right there. The reason why the trust fund is running out is because wealth inequality has hoarded so much money above the cap.
You don't think it's because
So
the
if you-
government does a
no,
terrible job managing their money?
no,
They have a huge
not at
spending
all.
problem, and they go, oh, look
No,
at all this money
they
we have
knew
for
this in
Social Security
1983,
that's earmarked for
40
60 years from now
ago.
that we're just going to spend on something
40
right
years
now.
ago, they predicted this. This is an actuarial table. Accountants sit there and look at it. This is a very easy math problem.
Accountants in the
If you-
government are always right? That's totally the thing that you're saying? That they're always correct about money, right? That's why we have a $40 trillion debt problem.
The problem isn't the math with the 40 trillion debt problem. It's you have tax
It's the
cuts and you
spending
spend-
problem. I totally
Yes.
agree with you, which
Social
I would argue is
Security-
part of why Social Security's gone in the hole already.
That's simply not true.
Oh, okay. So we're out of money from
If
the
the
Social
trust-
Security bucket.
No. Statutorily, by that I mean by law, Social Security pays for itself. If we do nothing, the 6.2% that your employer and your employee pays into it will pay out 78% of benefits starting in 2033.
And why is
But
it
if
going
we
down?
raise
If
the
everything's so much better, why
if
is it
we
only
raise the
78%?
cap- If we raise the cap, there's a cap right now at $176,000. So for instance, if you make $100,000, you pay $6,200 into that.
A year,
But
yeah.
a year. But if you make $4 million, do you know how much money you pay into Social Security?
Less than that.
$6,200.
And so why should wealthy people hang on? Why should wealthy people pay a higher percentage?
No, they should pay the same percentage. 6.2 on $400,000, 6.2 on $1 million.
And why should they pay even more money at all?
Because
they make more money? Again, you
Yes.
fundamentally have this idea
progressive
that because
taxation.
you have an idea that because somebody makes more money, that's fundamentally wrong, right?
No, I don't think it's fundamentally wrong. I think
You
that
have
they
a
should
di-
pay more taxes into it. Now, I do think as a society, we should not allow billionaires. So for
They
instance,
can pay more taxes
you know
generally,
what
but why should
the
they?
highest tax
Well,
rate
hang on,
was
hang on.
and the greatest
Does a-
expansion
does
of
a-
our economy
Hang on,
in this
does a
country?
billionaire get more money from Social Security if they went to go take it than I would?
No,
No,
because
of course
it's
not. So why
insurance.
should they pay more?
I'll tell
into
you
it?
why. Because it is a social insurance program that keeps you from being in poverty when you're a senior. And the reason why I think billionaires should pay more taxes than other people, even a higher percentage, is because it works better for society. The greatest expansion we've had in this country in terms of economics and the least amount of wealth disparity was in the 40s and 50s and 60s in this country. Do you know what the top marginal rate was?
It was high.
Do you know
yeah,
what it
I don't
was?
know the exact number, but
If you made over $470,000 in 1955, every dollar you would make above that was taxed at 90%.
so I have a question.
90 cents on every dollar was taxed above 470. So if we had in today's dollars,
which is wild, by the way. But
and it's also
but,
the greatest expansion we had of the economy.
yeah, you
It
can
helped
you can
more
expand
people in
for a
this country.
time, and then you see places.
No, then
you
the
see
tax
like Nordic
cuts-
countries that were like, oh, let's tax the hell out of our rich people, right? And then they go, whoops, we messed up. We can't actually live off of our terrible. We basically are able to live off our economic boom that they had between like the 40s and the 90s, and then we have to revert all of that because we made a terrible choice and we were able to have a party for 50 years until we realized we ran through all the money that capitalism got us. So let me ask you real quick. So the average person, right? Right now they fundamentally look at Social Security, young people like me, and they go, I'm going to have that money sitting waiting for me when I retire. Since your opinion is whatever works best for the average person is better, wouldn't you rather shift towards something that I would agree with, which is getting people that are 19, 20 years old into funding their own retirement rather than relying on other people to fund it for
You're talking
them?
like the 401k.
Sure.
Social
Well,
Security
not just the
was-
401k, but
Social-
for IRAs,
Security,
any
yeah.
other type of
Social
retirement.
Security
Would you
was
agree?
set up
Would we
as
agree with that?
Social Security was set up as part of a three-legged stool where back in the day when I was a kid, we had defined benefit pensions, where you'd know how much money you would get out.
Yeah.
That all shifted in the 80s to defined contribution, where you know how much you put in. The 401k started during that Reagan era. It has been a disaster because the fact of the matter, for better or for worse, people just don't save in the way that you're talking about.
Why?
It would be nice if
Well,
they
if
could.
we, if the
because
government,
things are,
if the government
things-
were changing the mindset and actually pushing that cultural shift towards, we're not just going to
how
hand
does-
you money when you're 65. You have
We've
to
had
plan
a
for it right now.
40-year experiment with that, the government affecting the cultural mindset, and it failed.
We've had a 40-year experiment
failed.
of everybody. You know
More
what my
people are
my
now
parents say?
relying
Do you
on
know
Social Security
do you know what
for their
grandparents say?
retirement.
They go, "Well, I'm just waiting for my Social Security check to come in," rather than I have $800,000 waiting for me because I thought about it when I was 19 and 20 because I didn't have this grab bag of money waiting for me. You're assuming
Hey, man,
that you're
it
assuming
would
that
be
young
great.
people
I
can't-
try and tell my kids
So we
to
agree.
save
So we
money, too.
agree. We should get rid of Social Security
No,
and
no.
phase it out. Well, no. So we should
I do
phase
not
out.
agree with-
How would you listen to this idea? You phase out Social Security to where people who have 5 years left before they retire get 100% of the benefits, and then people like me who have 40 years until we retire,
Dude,
I'm not
I
going to
don't
get
wanna
it. I have
screw
to.
you. I
I'm
want
going to
you
get
to-
screwed either way.
No,
you
you're
really,
not.
you really
No,
think
you're
I'm going to
not.
get Social Security
I
someday?
guarantee you, at the very least, you're going to get 78% of your benefits.
That's
if you
awesome. I'll get
join me- if you
$9,000 a
join
year.
me
That's great.
In calling for our government to increase the cap, in fact, get rid of the cap, then your grandkids will get Social Security.
I would
100%
much
of their
rather, and
benefits.
again, maybe we'll just disagree, but I would much rather result to, hey, 20-year-olds, please save for your own retirement, invest for your own retirement, because the government is bad at dealing with money.
And what happens
Don't
if they
rely on
don't?
them. What happens if what?
What happens if those 20-year-olds don't listen to you?
The same thing that happens if a 20-year-old just doesn't go and get a job because I
No,
tell them to.
no.
They're going to have a problem, but that's not my fault.
Now, I got news for you. It's not your fault, but there used to be in New York City 30,000 people sleeping
No one
on
in
the
this
Bowery
no one in this room was
before
alive before
Security.
Social Security. We've all lived under this, just like the
And it has
income
been
tax.
the most successful government program in the history of our government
Things that are
programs.
successful don't just start to die out and
It's
end up in
not
the
dying out.
It's the grab bag of money, the massive excess that was there in the early years because of the 42-to-1
No,
beneficial.
it wasn't a massive excess in 1936.
42-to-1
Dude,
is
that was
a
just
massive
because
excess.
There weren't that many people who had entered into the Social Security program.
And the fact that it
In 1970, it was 3.5 workers to 1. Now it's 2.5, but productivity has increased it. I've told you why the Social Security Trust Fund is running out. It is because of wealth disparity. billionaires hiding and hoarding their money above the cutoff line, which is 176,000. That's the cap. If you
Hiding
remove
and
the cap,
hoarding their money?
your grandkids
Billionaires aren't keeping $2 billion under their mattress. They're investing it back into
they're just putting it into some stock market, or they're just looking around.
And what do you think a
crypto
401k or an
whatever it is.
IRA relies upon? It relies on the stock market and things like that.
Yeah, a 401k relies on the stock market, and I knew people who were retiring in 2008 when the stock market tanked and they got screwed.
Well, that's a whole
But
other,
their
that's a
Social
whole other
Secu-
problem.
No,
I would argue that's
that is
largely
the
driven by the
problem.
government
That is
being, once
that
again,
is the
terrible with
problem.
policy and
That is
creating
the problem.
bad economic
Social
hazards.
Security is there regardless of what happens with the stock market.
Okay,
It's-
pause. You've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
Thanks, man.
Micah,
Hey, Micah.
Good evening,
Sam.
Sam.
Nice to meet you.
there's an idea that you have that basically government can kind of fix all these problems, right? If you didn't save for retirement, well, then the government can just come in, swoop in, and save you from
Well, not
that.
swoop in. It starts on literally the day you get your Social Security.
Sure. It swoops in once you retire, right? Once you can.
Well, you pay
once you
into
can,
it.
Right, exactly. And so you believe this idea basically that government is an effective organization, which it does time and time again. If you look at history, that's proven to not be true.
When you're hitting at retirement, you don't know. This is an insurance program. That's it. It's an insurance program, and it basically says you're insured against eating cat food when you're 65. And it works. It works.
No, it doesn't. You should have, well, one, you should have your own personal.
How doesn't it work?
How doesn't it work?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we've already discussed the details of how it is just completely failing as a program. Like,
Well, how is it failing as a
Because
program?
I'm not going to receive any Social
No,
Security
I've already
benefit.
told you right
I
now.
know. I'm not going to rehash out that debate.
Well,
the main
go look at
issue.
the numbers. You've just been told this, and you know why you've been told it? Is because they want to raid it to give tax cuts to rich people. That's why.
So are you saying there are the Trump tax cuts were only for rich people? You're saying
No,
people,
I'm not saying they're only for rich people.
Oh,
They
okay,
were-
then how could
rich
they
people
only-
benefited more from it than low-income people? And I would
And
say,
what do you mean benefited more from that? Because we already went over the percentage
'cause they
numbers,
don't
and we
need
know
the
that's
money.
not true.
They don't need the money as much, and they don't need it.
What are you talking about? These rich people are the people that are investing in smaller businesses. These are the people that are giving other people jobs to allow them to provide for their family.
Okay, pause.
These.
Pause.
What's up? Good to be back.
Nice to see you.
Okay, yeah, nice to see you too. I want to zoom out a little bit.
Okay.
So obviously you're pinpointing on Social Security, and there's a reason for that.
And healthcare too.
Oh, okay, but Social Security is the program that you're very concerned about, and that or like
Medicare,
that-
I'd love a Medicare for all program, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I think the reason you're focusing in on Social Security precisely is because Social Security is the most successful in a shadow of social welfare programs and government spending. That it's like the Democrats.
It's also the biggest bucket of money.
It is
that
the biggest
government's
bucket, but the
biggest thing.
Democrats have these social programs and this deficit spending, and it just never ends. It's never enough money. So you're focusing on Social Security because it is the one successful child, but you're ignoring all the social welfare state that we've become.
Social
70%
Security and
well,
Medicare and Medicaid make up
the majority.
over like a
Right, so
third
70% of our federal spending is mandatory. And that, you're right, it's Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest on debt. 8% of we're paying for that. So the Democrats run on this. Essentially, they want a welfare state. So yes, Social Security might help a lot of people, but it's like we're closer to a welfare state than we've ever been. 38% of the GDP in the U.S. is government spending. That's the highest since World War II. So us conservatives, we're trying to tell you, like, you guys are fiscally really
So are you worried
irresponsible.
about the tax cuts and what that does to the debt and deficit?
The tax cuts increased revenue.
No.
Yes.
I want to tell you about Kansas.
Okay, tell me about Kansas.
Sam Brown back in 2012 brought in Arthur Laffer. You know the Laffer curve, right? That's
Laffer curve, yeah.
the argument that if you cut taxes, you're going to get more revenue.
And that's exactly what happened.
Kansas.
No, that's exactly what happened
It
to TCJ.
destroyed Kansas. By 2016,
Let's
a
look at the
Republican
numbers.
legislature raised taxes again. They destroyed their education
Reality
system.
is against you, my friend.
Look up up
The
Kansas.
the
In
numbers-
fact,
the numbers
during
say
the Trump administration, they sent Sam Brown back. They made him the ambassador to faith because they didn't want this guy
If
around
you
because
want
it
to
was
tax
a
the rich,
disaster.
you should vote Republican because they pay more in taxes under Republican. It was the same
Revenue
as
went
Reagan.
down.
It
Look
was
at
the same as
Kansas.
Trump.
Look at
Look at the
Kansas.
U.S. Look at the
Look
U.S.
at
We
Kansas.
have the numbers
It
for
was
this.
the perfect
Obama's
experiment.
best year,
It destroyed
federal income
Kansas.
revenue is pales in comparison to Trump's worst year.
It-
do you get what I'm saying? Does more taxes necessarily equate to more revenue?
Yes.
No, that's where you're wrong. So if you look at TCJA, and I'll say the numbers again, the top 1% paid more into the system. GDP grew, wages grew 3% year over year under TCJA. So when you're saying tax the rich,
But you're
it sounds
saying,
like you're actually a Republican. You just don't know it yet.
You're confusing causation with
No, I'm not.
correlation
No, I'm
because
not.
because Obama's economic recovery was way too slow, and I agree with you on
Way
that.
too slow.
Way too slow.
When you have tons of stimulus, what you're doing is you're creating the Great Depression for the bottom 90%. All the assets inflate. So who does that benefit? Your policies benefit the 1%.
No,
Inflation
no.
disproportionately benefits the 1%. It's an immoral tax on the poor.
No,
and,
no, no, listen.
and that's exactly what happens when they
COVID
stimulate.
inflation was not a function of monetary stimulus.
It absolutely
No.
was. They
No.
increased the money supply
No.
by $6 trillion,
No, I
man.
understand
Like-
they did that. I understand they did that, and they could pull it back on taxes with the wealthy if they wanted to.
You can't
You're making an
tax-
argument
you
for
don't-
higher
do you-
taxation.
Okay, do you think taxing people makes the country wealthier? Is that what you think?
Does it make the country
Do taxes
wealthier?
make us wealthy? Is that government increasing taxes? Are we now more wealthy? Do you think that the only
If
way
you
you
tax
get,
and
the only
if
way
you
you
tax
create wealth
and
is by
spend-
producing?
If you tax and spend, government stimulus can, yes, increase GDP, of course.
Is GDP wealth?
Is GDP wealth?
If we import 10 million immigrants and our GDP goes up, are we now wealthier? If the
Not
housing
necessarily.
costs
No, no,
more,
no, no.
if CPI goes up because there's more
No,
people.
I understand. And inflation is
basic
under
economics.
control, and we haven't pulled that money off the table.
Right, but I'm just saying that what
Inflation is back
Look,
is
the
back
welfare
down because
state-
we had a problem.
the welfare
with
state makes us all
logistics.
poorer.
No,
That's
it
yes, it
doesn't.
does, and you can see
It
it,
doesn't.
across
We have
history.
cut. If you compare,
People want to
if you
come here for
compare-
economic opportunity. We don't want handouts. We want opportunity. That's why as an immigrant, that's why my family came here. We left the socialist paradise. It's garbage. The people that come here want economic opportunity. And you're stifling that. You're undermining capitalism and the free markets with your utopian vision.
There is no
And
free markets, dude.
Well, there's not anymore.
No, there's
But
never
now
been a
there
free
used to be.
market. No.
That is
No, there's no
what
such
makes
thing.
America the
Government
greatest. That's what makes the greatest.
establishes-
America is the
society's
greatest
government-
economy in the
gov-
world because of the free market.
The greatest
free market capitalism is the most
economy
ethical and
America
moral.
had was when we had 90% tax.
That's not true. The numbers are against you.
1940, 1950, 1960, the highest top marginal
So
tax rate
stagflation.
was
So what happened in the
90%, and we
When
had
Milton Friedman predicted stagflation in the 70s with your social welfare.
We had OPEC.
When-
we
when
had
your
an
welfare
oil
rep-
shock that drove inflation way up, and that was a function of OPEC. But in the 1940s, 1950s, and 1960s, highest top marginal tax rate was 90%.
we have an
We had
industrial
wealth
revol-
inequality
we had
shrink.
post-World War
We had something
II
called the
industrial
Great Compression,
What you're-
and more people
we had
enjoyed.
post-World War II
more
industrial
people
revolution.
enjoyed
We were
wealth
producing.
than-
we were
than at
producing
any
more than
other
every other
time in the
country. No, it's because we were producing more than every other country. That's what creates wealth.
And we were
Production.
doing that with a 90% tax rate on the wealthiest
Which was
individuals.
less when
90%.
Reagan came in and brought it down. The top 1% paid more. Can you believe that?
No.
Do you know that federal income tax?
when-
wait. You know federal income tax? It was when it was established.
You're talking about the Laffer curve, and I'm
No, I'm
telling
not
you to
talking
go
about
look
that.
at
Here's
at
my last
Kansas.
claim. When federal income tax in 1913, when it was established, was only targeted at the people making 100,000 and over. Now we don't even know, most people don't even know that. It's just a base tax. Why? Because the projections that they had of taxing the rich didn't work out like they thought. Because it doesn't work out. There's a ton of loopholes. The rich are smart. Like the
I
rich
understand.
people are smart. So focus
Our
on
top
producing.
marginal rate still produced an effective tax rate that is
It was
double what
lower,
it is
but
today.
it was
50%
More
effective
taxes
tax
does
rate.
not create more wealth.
Yes.
More taxes
well,
do not
I don't
create.
know what you mean by wealth. I mean,
Wealth is very
more-
simple. It's
more-
production of goods and services.
more
That's what wealth
taxes-
is. That's
more
what creates
taxes-
wealth. Money. People think money is
more
wealth.
taxes
Money buys wealth.
creates
Money
less wealth inequality, and then you have wealth that is shared by more people rather than being in the hands of a plutocracy or a plutonomy. And then you
shouldn't-
get stuff like an
Look,
oligarchy
We've
like
seen
we
what
have
happens
today.
when you punish your top producers over and over again. They leave. They stop producing. The government, the
Capital
undermining-
flight's a myth.
No, it isn't. You cripple the economy. Guess what happens next?
Wait, when did this happen in the country? When we had a 90%
It happens in
tax
every
rate,
socialist
did
country.
people-
This is the socialist playbook.
This is
They're like,
not
they
a-
come in and they're like, guys.
This is not a socialist country, and I'm not calling for socialism to have higher tax
It
rates.
is more
We
socialist
could
than
in-
ever before.
No,
we have
it's
more
not.
social welfare spending.
No.
GDP, I'll say it again, 38% of
No.
government spending, of GDP is government spending. We have more social welfare programs. And look at what happens, but how come we have all these programs and the black community is still living in poverty? How
What
come?
programs are you talking about that are geared towards the black community? We during in 2021.
What do you mean, what programs?
We did we expended. Hold on. In 2021.
What do you mean, what
hold
program?
On, hold on, hold on,
How
hold
much
on, hold on
money
one
is
second.
enough?
In
When is it enough?
2021,
You have the
in
richest country in the
2021,
world.
We
I just
offered
can't.
$300.
The way you guys think is
Excuse me.
just insane to me. Like,
In
you have
20,
the
let me just
richest-
finish this.
All right, go
in
ahead.
2021, we extended the child tax credit, which is basically a payment, $300
Social
per
welfare, so great.
social welfare.
Yes, yes.
We cut child poverty in 1 year
Okay.
by 45%. By 45%, but because no Republican would join the Democrats, and Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin voted against this
What year are you
provision
talking?
in Build Back. I'm talking 2021. From 2021 to 2022, we cut child poverty in this country by 45%.
I have to look at what you're-
Look
and
it
I'm
up.
sure- I feel like when I look
And
at it, I'm.
I
all right, well,
guarantee you, I will
I don't-
give you my phone
it's
number. You
half-
call
all
me,
right,
and if I was wrong,
All right, we'll call.
I'll do it off camera. And you will see that we cut child poverty in a year
Okay.
by 45%.
I'll
All
look
right,
at and
guys.
I'll look into your claim.
All right, guys.
And
Time's
we'll
up.
talk after.
My next claim is Trump's policies make the rich richer and the working class poorer.
Hello, sir.
Hey,
Hunter Howitz. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Okay, so do you mind if I ask what policies in specific are you referencing to?
Tax cuts for the rich. I think his idea of tariffs on countries and the way that he's talking about will make people poorer. I think all of the work that they're doing in terms of attacking the government agencies will make people poorer because, you know, when you get agencies that are supposed to protect us from corporate interests, they will externalize their costs, those corporations, instead of actually assuming themselves. So their profits are made on the backs of all of us, whether it's our health, our protection from consumer rights, worker rights. His anti-union policies will make us poorer.
So real quick, I'm going to touch on one of the things that you said. Now, there was a
Sure.
lot to unpack there, but
There's
we'll
a lot of
start-
policies
Yeah,
that
we'll
will
start at
make
the
you
very
poorer.
beginning. You talked about taxes. Let's talk about, in his first term, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017. There are a couple things in that specific policy that actually do benefit the middle class and the lower class more than the top 1%. So you mentioned taxes, right? But in that, from the IRS data that came out, the middle class and lower class got affected. I think they ended up saving like 3 to 4% on their taxes, on their tax cuts, whereas the billionaires only saved 2%. So if we're talking an actual dollar amount, sure, the billionaires saved more, but they also make a lot more, right? Also, the billionaires don't really care about an extra grand or two. In that specific policy, the child tax credit doubled from $1,000 per household to $2,000. No billionaire cares about an extra grand in their pocket, but I can guarantee you the working class does. So how would you rebuttal that?
I would say, in terms of the taxes themselves, well, the policies that Trump wants to pursue this time are to expand those taxes for wealthy folks. And over time, what starts to happen is you have this wealth disparity, and as the wealth disparity increases, it becomes harder for working people essentially to keep up. Things become more expensive. You get inflationary pressures when you have people with more money. We have more and more billionaires than we did 4 years ago. And a large part of that was obviously COVID, but a large part of it is also money starts to accelerate. Once you, like you say, when a millionaire gets a tax cut for a couple of grand or 60 grand or $500,000 at the end of the day, they end up investing that and it ends up growing because they're not out there working for their money. Their money is just is doing all the work.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I think we can agree with you on that when it comes to, you know, billionaires and millionaires and there being a wealth gap in our country, right? I don't think Republicans or liberals would disagree on that, but I think where we will fundamentally disagree is under Trump, right, the stats show that take-home pay was higher for the middle class and the lower class. Inflation was down. They weren't paying as much on taxes.
Inflation was down, but wage growth was actually greater during the Biden administration.
Well, that's because due to COVID, when a lot of people lost jobs.
No. I mean, I'm talking in percentage comparison between those 4 years and these past 4 years, wage growth grew, not from as a baseline on 2020, but I'm talking as a baseline from 2016.
Interesting. Okay, well then another point that I want to talk on with you real quick is you talked about slashing government agencies, for instance, the Department of Government Efficiency. I'm sure you've heard about that a lot in the news.
That's not a government agency. That's just some
It is
committee.
actually an executive order was signed to make DOGE an official government agency as of less than a week ago. So yeah, It is an official government agency. So obviously we're talking about money. We want people to be able to afford a house. We want them to be able to afford to raise a family, right? As a young man myself, I want to be able to grow up in America and be able to afford food one day, right? I mean, I can now, but continue that. And at the way things are going, it's unsustainable for people on the left, people on the right, people in the middle. So we have to come to a common ground on how to fix that. What's unsustainable? The fact that cost of living is increasing year after year.
What does DOGE do to inhibit cost of living?
Yeah, absolutely. So what DOGE is going to do, the Department of Government Efficiency, is slash a lot of the federal spending, right? So what happens when the feds...
What spending is going to get cut?
So I'm getting there. One second, sir. So what's going to happen is the Department of Government Efficiency is going to slash a lot of federal spending. What happens is the government, Republicans, Democrats alike, spend a bunch of money that, excuse my language, but it's nonsense, right? They spend it out here, they spend it out there.
Be more specific. Here or there. Are you talking about cutting defense? Because they're not going to cut defense.
Well, for example,
wait a second.
Well, no. Let me finish. Okay. $175 billion to Ukraine, first and foremost. That was a bunch of nonsense. So we're going to talk about that, but we also have a bunch of other things in the Defense Department, as well as a bunch of DEI departments.
Well, they're not touching, first of all, there are no DEI departments.
That's completely false.
Listen. Defense spending is not going to be touched by DOGE.
Ron.
And when you talk about the government, what's the biggest expenditure government has?
Our military and Social Security are our top two.
And Medicare and Medicaid, right? Now, they're not going to touch the military. Are they going to cut Social Security?
You're asking me like I'm part of DOGE.
No. Well, you're telling me that DOGE is going to help everybody here. And I'm telling you, if they cut Social Security, everybody in here is going to get hit. Because these folks are going to have to pay for their parents because Social Security keeps 2/3 of our elderly out of poverty. So tell me what they're going to cut that's going to make it easier for Americans.
I already did.
What?
I told you the $175 billion that we've sent to Ukraine. We're no longer going to
So he's going to...
Yes, so Donald Trump has signed an executive order.
Pause. You've been voted out by the majority. Please
Thank you,
return
sir.
to your seat.
Okay, so why did we see a higher increase in the top 1% paying as part of federal income revenue under TCJA?
Why did we see a higher increase in the...
So under TCJA, it was passed 2017, it was effective 2018. 2018 and onward, we actually saw the top 1% pay more. They had more of the federal income tax burden. They paid 45% as opposed to Obama. During Obama's tax plan, they only paid about 40 to 42% of the federal income tax.
Because they got more money.
Right, okay, so they got more money.
They got richer.
But why are they paying, and why did they get richer? So this goes on inflation that...
I mean, that's my point, is the rich are getting richer.
Right, but why would you say that they're getting richer? But you mentioned inflation?
No, they're not. I think that inflation, to the extent that there was money that wasn't a function of logistics and other problems that we had during COVID, yeah, the rich got richer. Not all inflation is a function of monetary inflation.
That's true, but when we look at COVID and we can see that they increased the money supply by 40%, they added $6 trillion, and you have a Federal Reserve System that's doing quantitative easing and pumping stimulus into the economy, you can attribute that to left-wing policy. The entire Federal Reserve System is Keynesian economics. Those are very left-wing.
Well, I can tell you this: inflation went up in Western European countries The same
that
rates
had
it
the
did.
stimulus. That had stimulus.
No. They didn't have the same level of stimulus
They
that we
did.
did. No, they did.
They absolutely did.
They did.
You can look at Japan. Yeah, I hear this topic
they
all the
didn't.
time from the Democrats. They say, "Oh, inflation was global." Not true. China never went above 3% inflation during all of COVID, and they were actually they were under deflationary pressures. Japan, which is part of the G7, was also never had deflationary pressures. They never had inflation increase. The only countries that had
I'm talking
inflation
in
increase.
Western Europe. You
Like
could
what
see
country?
inflation. Well, you could England, Germany,
'Cause they
Italy.
stimulated.
They didn't stimulate as much as we did. It wasn't monetary inflation. If you look at the cost of goods and
why-
logistics got screwed up because of COVID.
So let's look at the reason. All international trade, because we're the world reserve currency, is done in U.S. dollars. Because we experience it, domestic inflation was high.
So you're saying our inflation
Yes, it
caused
affects
higher inflation in Europe?
Absolutely, because
That's
trade-
not what economists say.
Well, you can look at the facts. International trade is we have dollar-denominated international trade. All international trade is that's why we're the world reserve currency. You guys claim that the U.S. recovered faster than anybody else. It's like, well,
It did.
It's because we have a privilege of being the world reserve currency, and we export our inflation. Like the strength.
We
of the-
export our
Yeah, and let
inflation.
me explain that. Let me explain that the U.S. dollar is the most safe asset in the world. In times of great crisis and great volatility, like COVID crisis, everybody turns to the dollar. Many
Sure.
currencies are tied to the dollar. So it's like when you
The euro is not tied to the dollar.
The euro is not, but international
Okay.
trade. So if the euro actually crashed against the dollar during COVID, the euro used to be above the dollar.
I'm unclear what your point.
My
of
point
this
is that the inflation is caused by left-wing policies and
so inflation was caused by, you're saying
supply shock and pumping trillions of dollars
Well,
into
first
the
of
economy.
all, first of all, you understand that the Federal Reserve is not part of Biden. Didn't have control over the Federal
Absolutely
Reserve.
not, but the entire Federal Reserve System is left-wing in economic theory. That's the Keynesian economics. It's interventionist economics. So,
You're saying that
the more
the
you
quantitative
stimulate,
easing,
the more you stimulate. Yeah.
Why didn't we get it through QE?
We do get it through
Why
QE.
didn't we get inflation during the
2008?
Obama years?
We did get
when
inflation.
We didn't get
The wealth gap that you guys
Excuse me.
attribute.
Wait.
We absolutely did.
What numbers were inflation did we get during the Obama years that were outside of like the 2% sort of Fed target?
I don't think it was as high as COVID. COVID hit as
No,
high as 9%.
it wasn't even remotely
right,
close.
But when we look at the effects of compounding inflation.
QE 1, 2, and 3 all happened during the Obama years. If your theory was correct, we would have had rampant inflation. In fact,
We did.
Glenn Beck was talking about how we were going to turn into
We did not-
Weimar Germany,
but
and
here's
none
the
of
thing,
that
but
happened.
here's the factors you're
None
missing.
of it.
Here's the
And
factors you're missing.
So if you
We didn't
look
close
at
down
what's
the
happening
economy.
at Western Europe, well, no, listen.
We didn't close down the
closed down the economy
The
around
Biden
the
administration
entire
closed down
world.
the economy.
I understand.
No, that was
Wait,
not the entire
excuse
world.
me, the Biden administration?
Yes, they forced mask mandates. They supported Democrat.
Wait.
They supported Democrat
Do you
states.
not remember who was president in the first year of COVID?
What? Yeah, it was Trump. I'm not.
Right.
So I'm not saying Trump had a role in this, but I'm saying.
Well, wait
that
a second. By the time in 2021, the economy was opening back up.
Yes, the economy.
All of what
no
you're
thanks
talking
to the,
about.
No thanks to the Democrats.
Well, okay,
the Democrats wanted to keep
here.
it closed.
Okay.
So
okay, you can talk about hypothetically what the Democrats want, but
it's not hypothetically.
everything-
We can look
listen,
at mask. We can look at their
listen, no,
mandates.
no,
we can
listen.
look at them closing
The
down.
economy closed down in 2020, March of 2020.
Well, okay,
Okay,
sure.
Donald Trump was president.
Pause. You've been voted out by the majority. Please return
Thank
to
you.
your seat.
How's it going, sir?
Good. How you
Ryan.
doing, Sam?
Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
When you're talking about like inflation, in 2021, Janet Yellen said it would be transitory, and then again in 2022 she said it would be transitory, and it turned out to not be transitory. And then one major thing happened in 2022. I think we all know what that was. That was the war in Ukraine, and I believe, and I can explain that the war in Ukraine was explicitly caused by Joe Biden's bad foreign policy, and that shot inflation up from. Like there was already pretty bad inflation in early 2022 and late 2021, but it shot it up from the low kind of margins in like 3 or 4% all the way to 9% in 2022 of July at the peak.
Inflation is now down around 2%, around where
Yeah, in between 2.5
yeah,
and 6.
where they're looking to get it, and we have really close to record unemployment that we've had over the past 4 years. But how does this have to do with Trump's policies not making the richer richer and the
Well,
rest of us poor.
Okay, so what I was just explaining with, I was going to get into oil prices. So oil prices skyrocketed in 2022 because in 2021, when Biden got into office, he shut down our Keystone pipeline, shut down all new oil and gas leases in America. Then he took the sanctions off.
We are producing right now more oil in this country than we ever have in the history of any country everywhere.
Yeah, I know.
On top of the fact that Biden is credited by oil traders, and this isn't something that I am terribly excited about.
What did he just do
but
on the East Coast?
apparently,
What did he just sign?
what Biden did during the past 4 years is he used the strategic oil reserve to drive down oil prices and essentially broke and it's filled back up, and he filled it back up, and he broke the negotiating power and the price setting power by oil countries across the world. I mean, oil traders hail him for doing this, and frankly, I don't think it's that impressive. But let's talk about what Trump's policies are.
We only have a little bit of time left, but I was getting to that. So oil prices in 2021, Biden took all the sanctions off of the pipeline in Russia, and then the pipeline in Russia ran straight through Ukraine originally, and he knew that if he invaded Ukraine would destroy the pipeline, and his economic success would be destroyed in Russia. And then when the sanctions,
Biden or
Putin knew that would occur in Russia if the sanctions were taken off of that pipeline, and Biden took all the sanctions off of Nord Stream 2 in Russia, like the second week he was in office, and then a year later, Putin invades Ukraine, sanctions happen all over the world, and inflation rises within 6 months all the way up to 9%. Trump is going to do great things with oil and let us drill, and what that actually does for the economy.
Like I say, we are producing more oil in this country than any country in the history of the world.
What executive order did Biden just sign to have to do with offshore drilling in the East Coast?
He stopped it.
Yeah. Really dumb idea. We're about to begin a new.
Well, so you want to go beyond even the record-breaking thing?
Yes, I want to become energy independent.
Climate?
And that lowers inflation.
We're going to sell this oil.
Better.
We don't use the oil. We sell it.
We sell getting money in the pockets of American citizens.
We sell it. Well, how is that oil getting to the pocket of American citizens?
Because when you lower the prices of oil, that lowers the prices of all products.
I understand that the inflationary press is effective of energy, but the fact of the matter is, they're just going to sell it.
Yeah, we're going to
sell it.
Yeah, so we're going to.
You want to produce even more oil than we are now.
Yes.
And you don't think climate change is going to impact? No. You don't believe in climate change?
Well, that's a whole nother discussion, but no.
Well, I mean, it's sort of the same discussion.
Yeah, no, I believe that climate change is, there's obviously an element of climate change that is partially true, but lowering or
Which part of it?
Raising man-made raising temperatures by 1 to 2 degrees Celsius in the next 150 years isn't necessarily a detriment to society. Human beings.
You don't think so?
No, human beings are very good at innovation, and we can build seawalls, and we can create carbon
technology. What kind of seawall are you going to build for Miami? What are you going to do about when we get?
I'm talking about the economy right now, which if we get back on topic.
All right, guys. Sorry, time's up. I let you go
no problem.
longer.
I choose Ben because he let me lecture him about Social Security.
My claim is that abortion is immoral and should not be legal.
Yeah, I disagree largely because I think the primary rights that we have under a society should belong to the person, and I don't believe a fetus is a person.
Okay, so that's very interesting. You don't believe the fetus is a person. When do you think that it gains personhood, in your opinion? Would you agree it's a human life, at least?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I mean, yes, I think largely, I think that claim is largely it's not relevant to the way that I think about it. I think about it in terms of personhood. I think life exists all around us. And
not human, human life, but not there's not human life in a tree, correct?
Right, correct.
Okay. So it's human life.
It's human life.
But it's not a person?
It's not a person.
At which point does it gain personhood and gain the value of being a human?
Well, I think it becomes a person when it's born.
Why? So 5 seconds prior, it's not born yet, not person. 5 seconds after exits the birth canal, person. Is there a magical quality to the birth canal? What is that?
The person becomes separate from the host that has been that it's been growing inside.
Okay, so would you assign that to other human beings that are attached to things? Like, for instance, if I'm attached to a machine, am I a machine now? Am I part of that machine, or am I still a human life? I just need support in order to stay alive.
If you've never been born, and you're growing in, let's say, a test tube, for instance, then yes, I would argue you're not a person yet.
Okay, so then, but it's not really the disconnected part. It's the being born part.
Well, being born means being disconnected from your mother.
Okay, so you're specifically aligning having the quality of being birthed as what makes someone a person.
Person within the context of like our society and civilization.
So just in our society, you wouldn't say that objectively that's a person. You would say that we just decide that it's a person because it's birth.
Yeah, rights we give to persons. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess that's an interesting kind of definition of what human life and specifically personhood
well, no,
is.
I don't. I'm conceding that it's human life, but that you're not a person until you're born, and you do not have the same rights that we would give. Look, we have rights about cruelty to animals, for instance, right? But they're not persons within the context of our society.
I'm not saying that they are, but specifically, it seems like you're just kind of saying, oh, it's a person when it's born, but you're not actually providing any consistent reason for that. You're just saying it just is a person.
I'm saying that on some level, there's a certain amount of arbitrariness as to when we give rights. One could say, do you say it's at conception?
Sure, yeah.
So IVF, in other words, would have to be illegal under your principle because.
I mean, I'm not sure that I would agree with IVF in that case. It really depends on the particulars in that case. But I believe.
Well, what do you mean the particulars in that?
Well, so for instance, at conception, you would still be a human life, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the fertilized egg attaches to the uterine wall.
Is it human life for you or what?
It's human life, yeah.
Okay, so human life should be protected.
Yes.
Okay, so IVF.
Yeah, I would say that.
So IVF should be illegal under your rubric.
No. So they're human lives, correct?
The IVF is when the egg and the sperm in that and then they're supplanted.
Yes.
Is it when is it human life?
As soon as it has unique human DNA. That's a human life.
Okay, so
it's a new human, correct?
Now in the IVF process, there's stuff that gets thrown out.
Yes,
you would consider that murder.
I'm not even defending IVF or going against it. I'm specifically saying abortion. That was my claim, right? I'm not going to argue IVF.
But isn't that abortion under your principle?
I would say if you get rid of human life after conception, I don't think that's moral. I'm not going to argue the IVF particulars because that's not what my claim was, right?
When we're talking about laws, right? Because you want to outlaw abortion.
Yes.
Correct? Okay. When we're talking about laws, it's not just morality when we form public policy around and create laws.
Not just, but it should be moral, correct?
Well, I mean, I think your definition of what constitutes moral and mine are different. For instance, I would prefer, in a perfect world, not to have abortion on demand until, up until birth, right?
Sure.
In a perfect world. However, we know in practice that when you start to restrict things, like say, only in the threat of life to the woman, let's say, that's the only way we're going to allow abortions, right? When you start to have these exceptions, they're in practice, they don't work. Because when your life is in jeopardy and you come into a hospital, the doctor doesn't see a bulb that shows up above you and say, your life is in jeopardy. It's always a subjective assessment. And what does life in jeopardy, hold on, what does life in jeopardy mean? Does it mean a 30% chance of death? Does it mean a 50%, a 70%, or a 20%? That's why we now have women who are dying. because doctors are afraid to perform abortions on them. That's true.
Are you
know it's the
referencing
case.
just
There's
because
been
just
multiple
because some
instances of this.
doctors misread plain text doesn't mean that
No,
that it's
when you
all of a sudden
pass
that life
laws,
is less valuable or more valuable.
No, it means that you are subjecting the woman to more risk, and it's impossible. These exceptions are all, they're canards.
No, Christian.
When you oppose a law, it is not just about morality, it's in practice. And
Sure,
in practice,
I understand that.
You cannot do this without sacrificing women's lives because
What
of
about
your
the unborn
morality.
children, though? Because let's go back to your born
Unborn
thing.
children
so let's
are
say
not
you have
persons,
you have a 9-month.
and the mother has more rights, in my mind, than the unborn child.
Yeah, that's a claim
The
that you can
fetus.
make. But so a 9-month birthed child, or just 9 month and just now born, it's a newborn baby. A 5-month could be emergency C-section and could be birthed, right? Let's say they don't do that. What's the difference between the arbitrary choice of taking that child out of the womb at 6
Why
months or
don't
5
we
months?
take all children
no, what
out
I'm
at
saying,
5
No, what I'm
months?
saying is that the personhood just because of birth runs into a problem where it starts to say,
All right, guys.
well,
I hate to do it, but I gotta do it. I'm sorry, that's time.
okay. Hey,
I'm glad I was here. It was interesting. I know my questions were more sort of policy oriented, I think, than maybe folks anticipated here. And I was a little bit surprised that there wasn't many people here who could address the policies. They were very, very sure of themselves as to why they voted for Trump, but a lot of it was sort of not material in any way.
So there was stuff that conservatives were saying today that I fundamentally disagreed with my entire heart, but at the end of the day, we're still part of the conservative movement. So I think there are people that I disagreed with, there are people that I completely did agree with, but the cool thing about this new conservative movement and the people here today is it's people from all different walks of life sharing their perspective.
I don't think Sam had any, like, at least when I was speaking to him, I don't think Sam really had great responses because the reality is not on his side. I don't think socialism works. I think social programs can be good up to a certain extent, but we are very socialist as a nation, and yeah, I mean, I'll just say it again. Socialism does not work. Sorry. Wish it did.
I think debate is healthy, and I think it helps viewers sort of clarify why certain people support certain things, and it gives an opportunity, I think, to both have fun and drama and maybe learn some stuff. So that's always a good thing.